Coronation Street teases that the arrival of Carl is more than just a new face on the cobbles. It's the spark that ignites a slow-burning fire in Kevin's life. A man already fraying at the edges begins to unravel in ways even he cannot comprehend. His life, once held together by thin threads of routine and familiar faces, now trembles under the weight of new emotions, unfamiliar jealousy, and suppressed fears. Kevin had always been a creature of habit. Early mornings, a cup of builder's tea, oil-stained fingers, and the dependable noise of the garage. ABI was his lighthouse amid the storm, a complicated but comforting presence in his ever-chaotic world. They had seen their share of troubles, fights, reconciliations, and silent understandings. But now, that rhythm was slowly beginning to shift. Ever since Carl had walked into their lives, everything, felt different. Carl had arrived quietly, without fanfare, and had offered his mechanical expertise at a time when the garage desperately needed extra hands. At first, Kevin was grateful. The work was piling up, and his own energy levels had been dipping. But what began as appreciation slowly soured into suspicion. Carl was younger, charming in a casual, unthreatening way, and instantly seemed to click with ABI. Not in any overtly romantic fashion, not at first. It was the small things, shared glances, private jokes, the easy way they stood near each other. Kevin watched from the shadows, and the shadows watched back. The truth was, Kevin was exhausted. More than tired, his mind ached, his chest heavy with thoughts he didn't want to admit. He had brushed off the constant fatigue, the loss of appetite, and the occasional dizziness as just signs of getting older. But deeper down, something was wrong. And he knew it. But denial was easier than dealing with the truth. It always was. So Kevin did what he had done too often, he lied. He told ABI and Tyrone that he was fine. He kept showing up at work, even when his hands shook too much to hold a wrench properly. He pushed through, all the while carefully crafting the illusion that he was simply tired from overworking himself. And when Carl started spending more time with ABI, when their laughter filled the corners of the garage that used to echo with Kevin's voice, Kevin's lies deepened. They became less about hiding his physical weakness, and more about leveraging it. He began to weaponize his illness, whatever it was, not for sympathy, but to guilt ABI into staying close. He hadn't intended to do it at first. But after seeing ABI brush a stray hair from Carl's forehead, laughing at some joke Kevin hadn't heard, the seed of desperation bloomed. He told her he was unwell. Vaguely, at first. He let her fuss over him. He exaggerated his symptoms when Carl was around, subtly painting himself as the vulnerable one in need of comfort. And ABI, bless her heart, cared. She cooked more, she stayed in more, she checked on him. But none of that dulled the ache when he saw her eyes flick to Carl when she thought he wasn't looking. Tyrone, Kevin's oldest mate, noticed the signs before anyone else. He watched as Kevin stumbled through another day at work, grey-faced and clearly unwell. He watched as Kevin snapped at Carl for no reason, then apologized awkwardly, only to repeat the cycle again the next day. And when Kevin finally confessed, at least part of it, to Tyrone, he was met not with support, but with quiet disappointment. "Kev, mate, this isn't the way," Tyrone had said gently, leaning against the garage wall. "You can't lie your way out of this. You need to talk to ABI. Be honest. She deserves that." But Kevin had shaken his head, stubborn as ever. "She'll leave, Ty. You see how they are. I can't." His voice had cracked then, the fear leaking out despite himself. Tyrone placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "If she's going to stay, let her stay because she wants to, not because she feels sorry for you. You're hurting yourself more than anyone." But the warning came too late. The damage was done. ABI had begun to see through the cracks in Kevin's stories. His inconsistent symptoms, the way he deflected questions, the way he always seemed more ill when Carl was around, it didn't add up. And ABI, fiercely loyal but nobody's fool, started asking the hard questions. "Are you telling me everything, Kev?" she asked one evening, sitting beside him as he stared blankly at the telly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes sharp. Kevin looked away. "Just tired, love. That's all. You've been tired for months. You've been angry. Paranoid. And now you're watching me like I'm doing something wrong. Aren't you?" he snapped before he could stop himself. Silence fell like a hammer. ABI rose slowly from the couch. "You don't get to accuse me while hiding things yourself." He tried to reach for her hand, to take the words back, but she was already gone. From that night on, things shifted again, only this time, the shift was colder. ABI still came home, still cooked dinner, still checked on him. But her warmth had cooled. She answered in monosyllables. She avoided his touch. She spent more hours at the garage, often working alongside Carl even when she didn't have to. And Kevin, realizing what he had done, began to unravel further. The lies were too tangled now. He couldn't go back. He couldn't suddenly say, "Actually, I might not be that sick," without revealing the manipulation. So he dug deeper. He faked doctor's appointments. He made vague allusions to worsening symptoms. He let ABI worry more and more, even as she drifted away. The final blow came when she found the prescription bottle. Not painkillers. Not heart medication. Just vitamins. The label from months ago. Barely touched. ABI stood in the kitchen holding the bottle, her knuckles white. "This is what you're taking?" she asked. Kevin hesitated. "I didn't want to scare you." No, Kev. You didn't want to lose me. And you thought if I believed you were dying, I'd stay." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in weeks, Kevin saw her cry. Not for him, but for what he had done. "I need time," she whispered. She packed a small bag that night. Said she'd stay with Toya for a few days. Maybe more. She didn't say when, or if, she was coming back. And Kevin. He sat alone, surrounded by silence, by shadows, and by the growing understanding that sometimes, love isn't enough. Especially when it's buried beneath fear, jealousy, and lies. The garage was quieter after that. Carl still showed up, kept his head down, did his work. Tyrone offered no, "I told you so," just silence and weary eyes. And Kevin. He moved through his days like a ghost, haunted not by what had happened, but by everything he'd tried so hard to control and still lost. Carl never asked questions. He sensed the tension, of course, anyone would, but he kept his role neutral, professional, and aloof. He spoke to Kevin only when necessary, offered no opinions, and never addressed the obvious elephant in the room, that Kevin was collapsing from the inside out. But even his silence carried weight, because every minute Carl didn't fight for ABI only made it clearer that he didn't need to. ABI's absence grew louder with each passing day. The garage lost its rhythm without her. Kevin fumbled jobs he once completed blindfolded. He missed invoices, forgot orders, snapped at customers. Tyrone, increasingly caught in the crossfire, tried to pick up the pieces, but his loyalty was already strained. He respected Kevin, but Kevin had burned through most of that capital. When he looked at Kevin now, he saw a man flailing, desperate to cling to a version of life that no longer existed. Tyrone finally confronted him again one night after work. "You need to talk to her. Properly. Apologize. Own it. And then let her choose." Kevin had barely looked up from the bench. You think she'll forgive me? That's not the point, Tyrone replied. She deserves the truth, not a performance. But Kevin wasn't ready. Shame clouded every thought. His guilt over the manipulation, the lies, and his own weakness, it all blurred into a dense fog. Every time he tried to rehearse what he would say to ABI, his voice cracked. So he stayed silent. And she stayed away. ABI, meanwhile, found quiet clarity away from the home she had once shared with Kevin. At Toya's, she slept better. Ate properly. Took long walks. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe without fear of judgment or guilt. But the guilt came anyway, just shaped differently. She still loved Kevin. But she was tired of fighting for a man who had stopped fighting for himself. It wasn't Carl's fault, she reminded herself. Carl had never made a move, never stepped beyond boundaries. But it was Kevin who had imagined a betrayal and built an emotional fortress around it. In doing so, he had pushed her straight into the loneliness he feared most. One afternoon, Carl visited Toya's flat unannounced. ABI answered the door, surprised but not unwelcoming. I just wanted to see if you were all right, Carl said. Garage's a bit of a mess without you. ABI smiled faintly. It's a bit of a mess in general, I hear. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry if I made anything harder. For you and Kevin. I never meant to come between anything. You didn't, she replied. That's the problem. Kevin convinced himself you did, and then made it real by trying to keep me away from you. They sat in silence a while, the weight of unspoken things pressing down. Carl didn't flirt. He didn't confess secret feelings. He simply sat with her, listened. And in that silence, ABI realized something. Carl wasn't a threat. He was a mirror, showing her everything Kevin had refused to be. Back at the garage, Kevin finally booked a real doctor's appointment. Not to continue the lie, but to start pulling it apart. The visit confirmed what he had feared. He was showing early symptoms of clinical depression. The doctor suggested therapy, medication, lifestyle changes. But most importantly, accountability. He took the leaflet home and stared at it for hours before picking up the phone. When ABI answered, her voice was tired but open. I saw the doctor, he said. For real this time. I've been lying, and I've hurt you more than I knew. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to fix it. Not to win you back, just because it's time. There was silence. Then, thank you for telling me. She didn't offer more, and he didn't push. But something shifted. In the following days, Kevin began to make quiet changes. He reduced his hours. Started journaling, something the therapist recommended. Tyrone helped more at the garage, their friendship slowly finding its footing again. Carl remained neutral, but Kevin started to see him less as a rival and more as a man simply doing his job. In time, even that animosity began to dissolve. ABI returned a week later, not with luggage, but with a toolbox. She didn't move back in, didn't speak of reconciliation. She simply walked into the garage, nodded at Tyrone, and got to work. Kevin watched her from the office, heart aching, but this time he didn't rush in. He let her lead. Their first conversation was brief. You all right? She asked. Getting there. You? Working on it. That was it. But it was more than enough. Weeks passed. Routine returned, fragile but real. Kevin remained distant, respectful. He stopped asking about her evenings, stopped needing constant reassurance. Instead, he focused on healing. And in that space, Something unexpected began to bloom, not reconciliation, but mutual respect. Tyrone remained the quiet anchor through it all, gently nudging both toward clarity. He joked less, listened more. He was the silent witness to their faltering journey, not toward romance, perhaps, but toward something more sustainable, honesty. By the end of the month, ABI finally spoke her truth. One late evening as they closed the garage, she turned to Kevin and said, "You didn't just lie about being sick. You lied about trusting me. That's what hurt the most." Kevin nodded. "I know. And I don't expect anything from you, not anymore. I just want to be better. For me." She studied him, long and hard. Then, simply, good. No promises were made. No kisses exchanged. But they stood side by side, locking up the place they once built together. And maybe that was enough. Carl soon announced he'd been offered a job in Manchester, better pay, more responsibility. He accepted. Quietly, respectfully, and without drama. When he said goodbye, he left no lingering tension behind. As Carl drove away from the street, Kevin watched from the garage door, not with envy, but with release. The storm had passed. What remained was wreckage, but also rebuilding. And for the first time in a long time, Kevin didn't feel like a ghost. He felt human. And that, perhaps, was the beginning, not of a love story, but of redemption.